welcome back to C&D Sports. We got a quick debate. Let's get right into it.
I posed this question to you earlier, and you said, let's make a video about this. But I'll say it again. When is it going to be time for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment to just say enough's enough and just can Shanahan, can Dubas, can Keefe, and just start over? You got
Not
good pieces, but this is fundamentally something's got to change because I'm tired of hearing. I'm not a Leafs fan, but I'm tired of hearing any organization say, "Oh, well, we're notorious slow starters, and we've got the guys to get it done." How do you know you've got the guys to get it done? You haven't done anything with these guys, and you also don't have to be a slow starting team. You could make a switch. You could be better because good teams often don't start slow every single year.
the way I look at it is okay, they're off to a slow start. Anything can happen for the Leafs this season. And by the end of it, they should be a playoff team. First off, that goaltending situation, we've seen very little of Matt Murray and he hasn't looked good. They're still waiting for a bounce back. Samsonov, when healthy, has been good. Shalgren's been, an AHL starter, so he's been serviceable, but yeah, you definitely don't want him starting games. Between Shanahan, Keefe, and Dubas, I don't feel Dubas is a problem. As for Keefe and Shanahan, I can't speak to that. Of course, Dubas has given up a lot, especially in terms of futures when it comes to picks and prospects. He's given up quite a bit to get good players, but the teams he's assembled, there have been no excuses for them to be first round exits. So when it comes to Dubas and his future, if Toronto lets him go, okay, that may work in their favor, but he'll get another job as a GM as soon as he wants, right? There are already teams looking at him because his contract does expire this year, so he won't be unemployed for long. As for Keefe and Shanahan, I'm not too sure what the future for them would entail because someone's got to be to blame for this Leafs squad. Maybe they're too soft. Maybe mentally there's something going on. And if a coach can't solve it, then it comes down to the players. But as a whole, I feel like everything's lacking in Toronto outside of Kyle Dubas.
And I want to touch back on I think what's missing on this team, and I think between Sheldon Keefe, Kyle Dubas, and Brendan Shanahan, and it's just accountability. It's just accountability to say this is going bad right now. Someone has to take the blame, and it has to be one of them. The blame cannot continually go on the players when you claim that the players have the quality to do this. So if the players have the quality, then obviously something's going wrong on the managerial side, something's going wrong on the coaching side, and there's just been a lack of accountability overall from the front office, from the bench, and that's what bothers me. But moving to what I wanted to talk about before, I'll touch back on the slow start to the season, and we talk about the first round exits, and that is the Leafs kryptonite is the first round. If the Leafs want to solve that, they have to play easier opponents. And to do that, having a slow start to the year is not going to help that. If you can win the Atlantic and play a wild card team, you probably have a better shot than playing a team that in not only knows you better being in the Atlantic as a 2 or a 3 seed, but it's also a team that is just closer to you in skill level there. And that's their problem year after year when they have to play Boston, when they have to play Tampa. These are just teams that are at their level. And when push comes to shove, these are teams that are just overall, they're managed better. Overall, they're coached better. They're just more cohesive as a unit than the Leafs. And if you want to solve that, getting off to slow starts year after year, you're not going to win divisions that way. And you're not going to get those favorable matchups against wildcard teams, which I think obviously playoff teams are playoff teams. And I think the Leafs still have to prove that they can beat a playoff team because they haven't proved that yet. But it's going to be a lot easier to prove that when you play a wildcard team. And I mean, I know this isn't like a comprehensive and complicated argument I'm making here. I'm not, saying anything groundbreaking here, but it just seems pretty open and shut that something's got to change so that you can get those favorable matchups to get over that hump. Because when you look at it now, Boston, even though Boston may be worse on paper than the Leafs, they're a more cohesive unit. Tampa Bay is better on paper than the Leafs, in my opinion, and they're a more cohesive unit. That's why they've made 3 straight Cup finals. So these are the type of teams that, like, Florida is a fairly cohesive unit. That's a team that, I think the Leafs would also have problems with in their division. you just don't want to be that 2 or 3 seed and just making it as one of those, those 3 buys. Like, congrats, you're not a wild card team. You want to be playing those wild card teams though, because those are the matchups that will probably, I mean, I can't say they will because the Leafs haven't shown me anything to say that they will win a first round matchup. But those are the type of matchups you want. So getting off to these slow starts and having, players, coaches, management saying that, we're notorious for starting slow. Well, you don't have to start slow, and those slow starts are going to come back to bite you once you get down towards the end of the season in the playoffs.
That's a fair point. Now, where I kind of disagree is I don't think it necessarily matters where you place when it comes to playoff time. Is yes, your point makes sense. Is you want the easier matchups, which means you have to have a better regular season. But either way, you're going to be playing playoff teams and you have to beat them. Again, it's really tough to pinpoint an issue in Toronto that hasn't already been stressed. The one that stands out most to me is the talent and how reliant they are on their talent. So when it comes to hard work, they get outworked. And we saw that in the Montreal Leafs series when they lost a 3-1 series lead, as they were outworked. They weren't outskilled. And I think that's still the issue in Toronto. So I think that's what they have to navigate around. And I don't want to be that guy, but it's hard to see how they do that without making a major move and trading out one of their big pieces to bring in players that are gritty and hardworking, guys that they've lost in Nazem Kadri and Zach Hyman and Connor Brown.
And I'm fine with making that move, and that comes back to the accountability thing there. That just comes back to management saying, you know what? This one's on us. We don't have the makeup to be that deep playoff team. We don't have that grittiness. We don't have that toughness that teams like Tampa and Boston, who again have beaten the Leafs. Those teams are well-rounded. They have that skill, but also with that grittiness, whereas the Leafs have that skill. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, those are all skilled guys, but they don't have that. And that comes back on management taking the accountability and just saying something has to change. And that's just what Dubas and Shanahan have not shown me. And that's what I come back. That's what I come back to. And I will circle back to what you said. It doesn't, and good for a playoff team. Yeah, playoff teams play playoff teams. I don't think the Leafs, and I mean, it's pretty sad to say, this is a Leafs team that should be cup contending team. I don't think that's the goal for them right now. I think just showing that they can win a series and getting the confidence from that, that'll build on possibly making the cup runs. But they do not have the confidence in this team. I guarantee they don't have the confidence to move on and progress in the playoffs if they can't win a first round. So that's when it doesn't matter. Playoff teams will be playoff teams. It doesn't matter where you place. But in terms of winning a first round series, that this is a team that hasn't done that since 2004. I think placement does matter in this case if they want to get over that hump. And I really do think they have to win that division if they want to feel comfortable about moving forward. I mean, it didn't necessarily work out for them in that weird COVID bubble year, losing to Montreal, but I still think that was probably their best shot to do it. So I don't know. Maybe the grittiness is the answer, and getting more gritty and making changes that way. I think if they can become a more well-rounded team, then yeah, placement doesn't matter. But if they're really convinced with sticking with the status quo, then yeah, you need to find a way to finish top of the Atlantic. I think if you want to feel confident about moving on, because that's what the Leafs have to look for. How are we going to get over that hump that we can't get over at year after year? Once you get over that hump, then you can look at the potential that you have of being a Stanley Cup contender.
So I definitely hear your point, and I just disagree because it doesn't necessarily matter where you place. When it comes playoff time, you just gotta win. They played Montreal, being the far superior team, they lost. And at this point, it doesn't matter. Outside of grit, I don't see a flaw in this team. When it comes to the future of their staff and even their core, even if they make it to the second round or even the conference finals, will it make sense keeping these guys around when you have the Matthews, Nylander, and then the Marner and Tavares contracts expiring? Or will you want a new head to kind of steer them into a new direction?
I think at that point, if they do end up getting over that hump and they do end up making it to, the conference finals or the Stanley Cup finals, like you said there, and they can't win a cup there, then I think, yeah, you do have to start thinking about, okay, it's another year where these guys are that much older, especially with John Tavares. And you think of, well, how can we make this team, how can we build this team that now we've gotten over this first round hump, which again, I won't dwell on it, but I think that, I will just say I think placement will help them get there. And once they get over that hump, I think this team is capable of making a deeper playoff run because this is just a team that lacks confidence. That's just what I see because they're blowing leads in the third period. This is just a team that just lacks confidence when I watch them. They're just an uninspiring team and they're just uninspired. And I mean, when you lose that many first round series, you have that lack of success. I can see why. Um, but I think at that point, though, if you end up moving on and you end up losing there, then yeah, I think regardless, you do have to take a serious look next season if there is a managerial change. If new management does come in, I think that would be the first thing you look at. Even if it is the same management of Shanahan and Dubas, I think the first thing they look at is, well, how do we upgrade this team now that guys like Tavares, Nylander, even Matthews' future being uncertain as well? How do we find a way to make this team competitive, to address our weaknesses of why we couldn't, live up to our potential of Stanley Cup potential? I think regardless, they're going to look at that next offseason again, especially with Tavares being so old.
There definitely is a 2-year window with the Matthews and Nylander contracts expiring, and those are the two guys that they're going to bring back. But when it comes to guys like most of their blue line and Matt Murray, that's where they'll have a lot of flexibility to bring in new players. So that's really where the timeline is for a managerial position, whether it's Dubas being extended or a change. Now, the one flaw I see in Dubas is he's almost too loyal to this group, and a lot of people will point that out. And because of that, he hasn't made the changes necessary in terms of bringing in that grit. I don't think the answer is necessarily to split up the four, but finding a way to surround them. And that's an issue they ran into because the salary cap didn't go up like it should have. They did run into a flat cap, and that made the
That's a fair
Tavares
point.
it made the Tavares contract just a major detriment to this team and their cap situation. So that's not Dubas's fault. There is some grace for that. But where I didn't like the moves Dubas made is when it came time to bring in that grit, he gave up so much for guys like Nick Foligno. And that's where it's like, oh man, like you lost so much talent and then you pay so much to replace that talent.
And that's a good point that you made that I didn't take into account in my arguments of having 3 years of a flat cap. I think this is something that if they do go with Dubas, it will be kind of a put up or shut up kind of deal, where he does have the opportunity to surround these guys better. I still do think that with these four big contracts of this core four, plus you consider guys like Morgan Riley who have bigger contracts, a guy like Jake Muzzin who has a bigger contract. When you look at that, I still think they'll be slightly strapped for cash, but again, they don't have to looking for guys on professional tryouts like Zach Aston Reese, who I like what Zach Aston Reese does, but you can get a lot better and get a lot more, I guess, more scoring friendly, just more overall talented grit that will help complement these guys. So you don't have to worry about, Zach Aston Reese. You don't have to try to rely on an aging Wayne Simmons. You can go out and you can find someone that maybe not to the caliber of Tom Wilson, but someone similar to that, where they are capable of getting onto the score sheet consistently, but they are those guys that do really complement and almost protect that core four if you're really glued to this core four.
It's really simple. If they want a new future, they have the chance to do that in 2 years. They can clear house and decide what to do with that new management, or they can stay the course. It's a matter of how much they trust Dubas and what they want to do going forward. But with that, it's our little argument for today. We will continue monitoring the Leaf situation because it's just so fun. And there'll be more hockey videos, more baseball videos, more sports videos. So like, subscribe, stay tuned. We'll see you soon.